Alright, so this video today is going to be a little bit different compared to our usual performance comparisons, but I think this one's actually really important if you are a physical collector. So today we're going to be testing out RAIDOU Remastered, but not just the Switch 2 version. I've actually got 3 builds to compare here. The Switch 1 build, the Switch 2 build, and then the Switch 1 build running on Switch 2. Now why is that? Because if you're buying the physical version on Switch 2, you're not getting the game on cartridge. It's a game key card, meaning it's just a download. Well, the Switch 1 release, that's on cartridge. That's what physical collectors want. Most weirdly, though, about this whole situation is there's no upgrade path. You can't buy the Switch 1 and then patch in the Switch 2. Also, on that note, you can't even transfer save data, which is definitely a little weird. They basically treated them like 2 completely separate games, and hopefully this concept changes in the future and it goes a bit more traditional of backwards compatible. But yeah, right now, this is what we are with. Hence, I wanted to do this full kind of coverage of, I guess, all 3 ways you could be playing. So yeah, in this one, we'll be breaking down visuals, frame rate, load times, just to figure out which version is going to be most worth your time. And yeah, overall, the big question is the Switch 2 build a massive leap forward? Let's find out. Alright, if you are new here, I cover all things Nintendo Switch. Been doing it for 7 years now, reviews, performance breakdowns, deals, the works basically. But we are also a smaller channel, so subscribing, it helps massively and it lets us keep doing in-depth content like this. Also, just quickly then, a huge thanks to Sega and Atlus for providing review codes on both platforms so we could test everything for you properly. So what is RAIDOU Remastered? Well, a quick overview. It's an action RPG spin-off of Shin Megami Tensei. Now, the game itself is set in 1920s Tokyo. You play as titled RAIDOU, a devil summoner working undercover as a student while solving these supernatural cases for a detective agency. It's got a distinct pulp mystery tone to it all. Also some old school elements, given it released, in the 90s. Fixed camera exploration, that kind of good stuff. But overall, where it's really different to a normal Shin Megami Tensei game is it's real-time combat with your demon allies, and yeah, it's really good fun in that sense. I also love the setting. It blends, era-specific aesthetics with occult weirdness. If you want to learn more about the game though, anyways, this isn't a review. That's over on the channel. If you want the full breakdown, I'll also link it in the comments below. Alright, so let's start with the visuals, and straight up, there are clear improvements on Switch 2. So first off, the shadows are sharper. It's most noticeable on characters. Just look at the floor beneath them. On Switch 1, they're a little smudged, a little soft around the edges. Switch 2 cleans them up to kind of make them stand out. Then there's the aliasing, and this is probably the biggest upgrade. If you're looking for an obvious example, I'd check out the demons following behind you. On Switch 1, there's kind of jagged edges, especially when they move. On Switch 2, that's been smoothed out. Yeah, it's not just limited to your party either, it's just kind of the easy thing to spot. You'll see it in rooftops, cables, environmental detail, pretty much everything. And I think generally the Switch 2 build holds together better in motion. Beyond that then, overall clarity gets a boost thanks to the Switch 2's 4K output. Signage, fine textures, background dressing, it's all just a little easier to make out, especially docked on a big screen. So yeah, I think those few areas, I don't think it's a massive jump between the 2 builds, but definitely some things with time that will begin to stand out. Now then, running the Switch 1 version on a Switch 2, you do get that same clarity bump from the system's output, but that's really it. I think the rest then is identical to the Switch 1 build, unfortunately. Same aliasing, same shadow quality, same, general, I guess, output. The only other point worth noting visually is Switch 1 and Switch 1 on Switch 2. They will output at 720p in handheld. The Switch 2 build, that's 1080p. Both then hold the same resolution, docked 1080p, then naturally the Switch 2 boosts to 4K. Load times then, and the Switch 2 version is noticeably faster than Switch 1, especially the first time you load up the game. That's on screen right now. But once you are into it, both are actually very quick. This said, Switch 2 still cuts most transitions in half. If you're running then the Switch 1 version on Switch 2, extremely close. That's the middle section on screen. It is just a split second behind that Switch 2 build. Alright, so let's talk frame rate, because this is where things really matter. Leading up to launch, Sega and Atlus advertised 30 to 60 FPS for Switch 1 and a flat 60 FPS for Switch 2, and broadly that holds true. On Switch 1, it's fully variable. Docked or handheld, you're bouncing between 30 and 60, sometimes quickly. And because I played the Switch 2 version first, going back was a real contrast. The big surprise, it's not just heavy combat or big effects, it fluctuates near non-stop. In battles, enemy count and effects really can tank it. There were a few fights where a large move hit and I genuinely mistimed a dodge because the slowdown just threw me off. But even outside of fights, the instability continues. The static camera cuts from area to area can make the drops feel extra jarring. See, it's not broken or anything, but it definitely overall, that fluctuation, the consistency of it, it impacts movement accuracy and I guess general smoothness. There's also then a short transition screen between battles. So basically as you're moving from the world into one of these, engagements. And on the Switch One, that screen, it stutters a tiny bit. Not a huge deal, but for me, it kind of breaks the immersion a little bit because this game is kind of trying to sell almost this noir cinematic flair and that brief pause. I don't know, I noticed it every single time. Now though, Switch 2, and it is very close to the advertised Lock 60 and a massive upgrade generally. Be honest, however, I didn't notice any drops during normal gameplay, but when I went frame by frame in post, a couple of specific moves actually dipped by a frame or two. Now you will not feel it, I didn't notice it at all as I said. I just want to put what the analysis told me on screen for you all so you can see it for yourself. But if I had to describe it on Switch 2, exploration, rock solid, combat, rock solid, and overall, a huge difference over the Switch 1. Now though, what about running the Switch 1 version on Switch 2? And this bit's important for the collectors again. It mirrors a Switch 2 build, near lock 60 FPS, same occasional 1 to 2 frame dips, but to be fully transparent, I didn't replay the full game on Switch 1 because there's no upgrade path, meaning I couldn't transfer my save to test every area. Still though, I feel confident telling you all this because the game structure, it's smaller segmented maps, so I don't expect with it any major surprises. So from what I can tell in this opening, yeah, it's performing in line with the Switch 2 build. See, overall, this one's a bit of a weird case. The Switch 2 version is absolutely better than the Switch 1 build, no question. Visually, the difference is minor but noticeable. Performance-wise, night and day. It's a clear win. That said, we've got to talk about physical collectors, because if you're one of them, you'll probably be skipping the Switch 2 version entirely. That game key card setup, yeah, not what a lot of us want. But look, if you are thinking about sticking with the Switch 1 cart instead for that reason, what are you giving up? And it's mostly just a bit of image clarity. Yes, the shadows are softer, aliasing is more visible, and the handheld mode will lack that sharper output. But performance, surprisingly close. It holds to the advertised 60 FPS pretty well. As I said, didn't notice any changes. And in my testing, ran on par with Switch 2 build when played on the new hardware. And I think, yeah, for a lot of people, well, for a lot of collectors, that trade-off, it will be worth it. And I think we can all say we totally get it. So hopefully this breakdown helped you out. If you got any questions, drop them in the comments. And if you enjoyed this, a subscription, genuinely, it just helps us a huge amount. All right, cheers all.